Welcome to week 1 of the Psychology of Eating. This week is all about nutrition. In this lecture, we are going to talk about the basics of calories, what they are, where they come from, and the other nutrients that your body needs in order to do its best at keeping you healthy and thriving. So let's start with the basics. When we think about what we eat, most of us are probably familiar with 3 different sources of calories. These are what are known as the macronutrients. These are your carbs, your protein, and your fat. However, your body also needs vitamins and minerals and water in order to thrive and do its job. These are known as micronutrients. We need them all, and they are all part of a healthy diet. So where do calories come from? Micronutrients do not have calories, even though they are considered essential for our body's functioning abilities. Macronutrients, on the other hand, do have calories. Carbohydrates and protein have about 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9 calories per gram, and alcohol contains 7 calories per gram. Now we'll talk in coming weeks about different sources of carbs, protein, and fat, and how they may not all stack up the same. And you'll get to look at the USDA's food plate and talk about what the government currently recommends we consume. Now here's my big caveat. I am not going to tell you how to eat. You can find just about every meal plan under the sun out there, and everyone thinks often that their way is the right way. Some will tell you to eat high carbs, some will tell you to eat high protein, some will tell you to eat high fat, some will tell you to source your carbs from certain foods and avoid certain foods, same with protein and same with fat. My job as your instructor is not to tell you what to eat, because everybody's body is different. And so although we're going to go through some dietary guidelines today, endorsed by some of the major government agencies, I'm not telling you that that is how you need to eat. Your job is to figure out what your body does best with. And that's something no one can lecture you on. It's going to be a process of you just experimenting with different kinds of caloric intakes, with different proportions of carbs, protein, and fat, with different food sources, and figuring out what your body thrives on and what doesn't feel so good. So, before we dive into that, what is a calorie? So a lot of times calories get a bad rap. People want to lower their calories, or they want to make sure their calories come from the right source. But a calorie is not bad. A calorie is actually good. It's energy. It's the energy that it takes to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Kelvin, or 1 gram by 1 degree Celsius. Calories are fuel. We need them to survive and thrive. We'll talk more about some of the different diets and views on caloric intake when we get to the dieting section in the course. But know that calories are not your enemy. They're actually your friend. You can't live without ingesting appropriate energy, appropriate fuel for your activities. So how do you know how many calories you need? Again, there's a lot of different websites out there, including the USDA, that'll give you a general guideline based on your estimated metabolic rate. So your metabolism is the amount of energy or calories your body burns just to maintain itself. Metabolism can be affected by a number of things. Genetics. Some of us have faster or slower metabolisms that have nothing to do with anything that we've necessarily done. Research suggests that about 5 to 10% of our metabolism is controlled solely by genetics. Most of our metabolism comes from factors that we have some control over. The first is your body composition. And so what they mean by this is percentage of body fat to muscle to water to all of the other things that are comprised of your body. Now, here's the caveat. Part of this is genetic. So when we talk about your body composition, we need to talk about your body build. So one of the things that really frustrates students sometimes in this class is they may have an idea of what they want to look like. And we'll talk about body image more as we progress. But sometimes that ideal, oftentimes, in fact, that ideal is not realistic. So I want you to pause me for just a minute and I want you to do a little experiment for yourself. So you're going to take your thumb and your forefinger, and I want you to try to wrap them around your wrist. Doesn't matter which wrist, just use the opposite hand and the opposite wrist. So part of your body composition is your body build. If your fingers, when you try to wrap them around your wrist, if they cross, so your thumb overlaps your forefinger, then you have what's called a small build. And this is based on your bone, largely, your bone structure. That's totally genetic. Nothing you can do to change your bone build. If your fingers just touch, you have a medium bone build. And if your fingers do not touch, then you likely have a large bone build. So if you have a large bone build and you're trying to look like someone that has a small bone build, it is never going to happen. Your body, because of its genetic propensity for the size of your bones, cannot handle a different size. So a lot of times, and we'll talk about this more as we progress, when you go to the doctor's office, you'll get your height and your weight, you'll get your BMR. Again, they don't take things like body build necessarily into account. So I want to go ahead and kind of start with that. And if you are someone who is trying to alter your metabolism or alter your weight, make sure that you're doing so realistically. And we'll talk about that more as we progress. So things that are under your control. Bone build, not so much. Percentage of body fat to muscle mass may be more under your control. Again, there is some genetic component to that, but the more you exercise, which is another component of metabolism, the more like you probably are going to have more muscle to less body fat in your body composition. So things that you may be able to control. You can definitely control how much you exercise. Body composition, again, part of that's bone build, which you can't control, but part of that is also proportion of fat to muscle mass. And then how much you're eating. So the more calories you consume, it actually speeds up your metabolism to an extent because your body is trying to burn those calories and takes calories to burn calories to figure out what to do with them, whether they're going to get synthesized, whether they're going to get turned into muscle, whether they're going to get turned into fat, or they're going to be processed and used for fuel. Your body has to burn calories to use calories. Some people, when they first go on a weight loss diet, engage in a pretty dramatic calorie restriction. That actually causes your metabolism to slow down. Your body is nothing if not efficient. We'll talk about this more as the course progresses. But know that there are a lot of things you may be doing, including how many calories you're eating per day, that are affecting your metabolism that you may not have realized. So, genetics, body composition, how much you exercise, and how much you eat, whether you are overeating or undereating or eating the quote-unquote right amount of calories for your body, which is going to vary by day based on things like how much activity you're getting per day. So that all comprises your metabolism, or your basal metabolic rate, BMR. So I told you I would share with you some of the common recommendations in the United States. So these are dietary guidelines from the USDA, from the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, American Diabetes Association, the National Research Council. So they all have sort of a prescription for what the average person should be, the average adult should be consuming in the United States. And you can go on the USDA's MyPlate website and you can get, again, a kind of a baseline of what they think caloric-wise you should be eating. They will even give you recommendations for recipes and meal plans if you want. There are a lot of websites out there, a lot of apps out there that do the same thing. So I'm giving you these guidelines, not because I'm telling you they're right for your body. They may or may not be. But because these are common recommendations you're going to see in a lot of different places in respected medical communities. Also pretty standard for if you talk to a registered dietitian, they would probably follow these guidelines or something similar. So they talk about things like keeping your saturated fats lower and your polyunsaturated fats. So with saturated fats and polyunsaturated fats, they want your fat content to be about 20% of your calories. Cholesterol, limit it to less than 300 milligrams per day. Again, depending on you, if you have high cholesterol, your doctor may limit that further. If cholesterol is not an issue in your family, you may be able to get away with more than that. Carbohydrates, most dietitians will tell you to at least 55, usually to 65% of your daily intake should come from carbs. Again, there are a lot of diets out there that tell you to limit carbs. It's up to you to decide what works best for you. I will say that the research suggests that when you limit carbs below 40 to 50% of your dietary intake, a lot of times it can cause brain fog and mental confusion because your brain actually thrives and functions on carbohydrates. You actually need the sugars that are converted from eating those carbohydrates for your brain to work properly. So if you're on a low carb diet and you're feeling foggy headed, confused, having issues with memory, you probably need to up your carbs. Energy intake to achieve and maintain a healthy weight, whatever that means for you. And then sodium intake, depending on your current medical condition, you may have a restricted sodium diet. You may not be on a restricted sodium diet. This is just the general recommendation from several governing bodies in the United States. Again, my caveat, everybody's body is different, and you need to figure out what works best for you in terms of caloric intake, in terms of the proportion of carbs to fat to protein, in terms of making sure you're getting enough micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and just the specific foods that you eat. Everybody's body is different. Okay, so I grew up with the pyramid, and depending on when you went through school and whether you had a health class, you might have had a pyramid or you might have had this. So in 2010, the USDA introduced what it called the new plate. Not really new anymore. It's just kind of the plate. Myplate.gov is where you can go to get all the information. You'll see some links in your Blackboard material for the week. So the plate, as you can see, they're no longer telling you specific number of servings. So if you're familiar with the pyramid, the bottom was your carbs, and then it kind of went up in terms of number of servings per day, with fats being at the very, very top, meaning you were supposed to consume very little fats. They got away from that because they got sued by a group of physicians for the responsible conduct of medicine in 2010. And the result was this. They got rid of the pyramid, which was heavily endorsed not by dietitians, but by lobbyists, which is what the physicians group sued them over. And who sues the federal government and wins? Nobody, but they did. So anyway, emerging from that was this new plate. The one thing that the physicians group lost on was the inclusion of dairy. So you'll see 3 a day of dairy. They still sometimes have commercials if you have regular TV for that. The physicians group actually lobbied to have dairy removed because the argument that we need dairy to have enough calcium in our diet has been shown to be unfounded by the research. Other countries that don't have dairy do just fine, actually have better calcium intakes than we do. So they lost, though. Dairy is still a really big industry in the United States. The lobbyist won on that. But if you don't do well with dairy, you don't need it. That's what I'm trying to say. Just make sure that you're getting calcium from other sources. You'll find that a lot of the population becomes lactose intolerant as you get older. It's not uncommon for milk drinkers, cheese eaters, dairy consumers, 20s, 30s, 40s to just lose the enzymes in their digestive system to be able to process that. And so if you're a person that doesn't tolerate dairy or just chooses not to eat dairy for other reasons, that is fine. Just make sure you're getting your calcium from other sources like leafy greens. So bottom line, we have this new plate. You'll notice that they got rid of, if you're familiar with the pyramid, they got rid of the meat group, and now we just have a protein group. And this could be proteins from any sources. It could be meat, it could be legumes, it could be soy, it could be whatever you decide that you like to source for your protein. And that's about 1/4 of your plate. You'll find half of your plate is fruits and vegetables, and then the rest of your plate, so a little over 1/4, is grains. And they do recommend that as often as possible, that's going to be whole grains and not processed food. More to come on that. So again, this is coming from the USDA, basic guidelines. My little caveat and little asterisk there again is do what's best for your body. But most dietitians, most of those government agencies we just discussed agree, healthy weight for your body. Do something physically active every day. It doesn't have to be running a marathon. Whatever activity that you enjoy, maybe it's walking, parking on one side of campus and walking to the other a couple times a day, just to get to and from class. Maybe you like to run, or you like to bike, or you ski, or whatever you may do for rock climbing, whatever you do. Be physically active each day in a way that's healthy for you. Of course, they endorse the plate because they came up with it. Like I said, there's a lot of different websites and apps out there. Everybody has their own idea of the best plan. It's ultimately up to you to decide what works best for your body. Choose a variety of grains and fruits and vegetables. The key really is variety. So the gold standard is you want to eat something from a different color, right? You want to have a rainbow of foods in your diet every day, and natural colors, not artificial dyes. So you want to make sure you're eating something from the red group, like tomatoes or strawberries, something from the white group, like onions or garlic, and you're eating yellow, like banana. So if you go on the USDA's website, you can get some ideas. But the idea is we don't want to get in a food rut. We want to rotate what we're eating and make sure that we have a lot of variety in our diet, as much whole, unprocessed food as possible. Make sure that food that needs to be cooked is cooked safely, and know how to read nutrition labels, which is our next lecture.